Riccardo's infectious smile, off-track antics and slick driving skills have left a mark on F1 that can't be ignored. But is he willing to do what it takes to reclaim a seat in F1? With his backseat role at Red Bull following his disastrous 2 years with the McLaren clan, Danny does not look to be retaking the wheel anytime soon. But is there a future in the sport for the Aussie? Guenther Steiner seems to think so, but Helmut Marko clearly does not see a future in Red Bull, and F1 veteran Alan Jones claims Riccardo has no future in F1 full stop. Stick around to find out why.
Daniel Ricciardo becomes a new winner in Formula One. The team rush out to applaud him home. Mercedes failed.
Such an experienced driver is always a good option for teams to have, and Guenther Steiner has been quick to leave the door open on Ricciardo joining his team, by suggesting he'd be open to forgetting the huge wage demands Ricciardo had last year, and discuss the possibility of negotiating with Ricciardo for a potential comeback to F1 in 2024, if the Australian driver expressed interest in doing so. It's a little bit early to speak about a driver change already for next year, he said, adding that he cannot promise anything. At some point maybe I speak with him, but I cannot promise anything because if our two guys do a good job, I'll think where I stand with it. But for sure, Danny is. Everybody's wanting to speak with Danny after a year off. According to team principal Otmar Safnauer, Alpine also had initial talks with Ricciardo as well, talks that haven't as yet deemed successful. Now let's quickly recap how Daniel Ricciardo found himself in this position, before we dive into why veterans of the sport claim his time behind an F1 car is limited. Since his debut, Daniel Ricciardo has achieved an impressive total of 8 Grand Prix victories. In 2011, the talented Aussie driver made his Formula One debut at the British Grand Prix with the HRT team. At the time, he was test driving under Red Bull Racing's sister team, Scuderia Toro Rosso, as part of a deal between the two teams. He joined the McLaren team for the 2021 and 2022 seasons, partnering with Lando Norris. However, during the lead-up to the 2022 Monaco Grand Prix, Ricciardo faced heavy criticism from McLaren CEO Zak Brown for his underwhelming performance in the early part of the season. In fact, Ricciardo thinks he lost that mojo over 2 seasons at McLaren. Maybe when I look back, that's a weakness of mine, but in a way it's a strength as I feel better at the front of the grid. I feel like I perform in those situations with a bit more pressure and a bit more emphasis on a podium, he said. After 2 back-to-back 9th place finishes in Austria and France, Ricciardo's struggles continued as he failed to score any points at the Hungarian Grand Prix. I don't think either of us got the result that we'd hoped for, and we felt we'd given it sufficient time on both sides. He finished 15th in the race following a collision with Lance Stroll, for which he received a 5-second penalty. In August 2022, McLaren and Ricciardo came to a mutual agreement to terminate his contract a year early. It wasn't an easy decision, it wasn't an overnight decision, it was something that we spoke with him about for many months, said Brown. We came to the conclusion that for whatever reason it wasn't working, and that we needed to make a change, which was very difficult. Following the qualifying session of the Japanese Grand Prix, Ricciardo announced that he would not be competing in the 2023 Formula One season. Ricciardo then made a significant decision to return to Red Bull as a development driver for the 2023 season. The move was ultimately completed due to the former McLaren driver wanting to spend his 1-year sabbatical in a familiar environment. The familiarity of the team, coupled with the prospect of working on the development of a competitive race car, was too good an opportunity to turn down. Once I had the initial chats with Red Bull, when we really started to engage a little further, that's when it was kind of like a light bulb where I was like, this is the only place for me. It's perfect. On whether the Australian would have moved to another team further down the grid, Brown speculated that Ricciardo was looking for something that suited his pedigree. He probably could have driven for Williams or Haas is my guess, Brown explained. I'm speculating that he doesn't want to drive for a team that's 9th or 10th in the championship, which I understand given his pedigree. In addition to Ricciardo's personal goals, Red Bull Racing was also keen to have him on board for various marketing campaigns. The driver's charisma, likability and success on the track make him a valuable asset for any team looking to boost its brand recognition. With Red Bull Racing's reputation for creating viral marketing campaigns, Ricciardo's involvement in these activities could prove to be a win-win situation for both parties. I think like everyone bummed he won't be on the grid because he's great for the sport and he wants to race, said Brown. And whilst initially the world of F1 saw Ricciardo as a replacement for Perez, Helmut Marko was quick to end this speculation by stepping in to say that should either Max or Perez need a replacement, it would be Liam Lawson, one of Red Bull's junior drivers, stepping in, and not Ricciardo. Even Franz Tost of AlphaTauri stated that he would not use Riccardo if one of his drivers was unable to compete. Theoretically we could, Tost said, but I would prefer not to see it happen. There are young drivers like Liam Lawson, like Dennis Alger. I think we would focus mainly on young drivers. Now it's one thing to say the reserve driver won't fill in for a main man, but Alan Jones, former Australian driver, doubts fellow Australian Daniel Ricciardo will return to the Formula 1 grid at all. Talking on the dilemma of where he would go and who would be willing to take him. Whether he has a future at Red Bull, Jones said, "I doubt it." At the end of the day, there's probably no reason why Red Bull won't re-sign Perez and obviously Verstappen, Jones 76 added. Jones said that he couldn't see anyone at Ferrari re-signing or leaving, and thus he couldn't determine where he would go. Really, in my opinion, I think he concentrated and spent a bit too much time on his activities out of the cockpit rather than in it. That's my opinion. It seems that Daniel himself is rather lost as to his future. A lot of the reason for taking this year off was that I didn't want to just jump back into a car, any car just to be one of the F1 drivers. And I still don't see myself starting from scratch and rebuilding a career from ground zero and going at it for another decade. He acknowledges that he has struggled in previous seasons. Daniel said that he faced professional challenges over the past couple of years, which had made him want to prove his worth as a competitor and remind people that he was still present, maintaining his professionalism and contributing to success. It's only been a few months, but I think some itches have been scratched, so to speak. I thought I might just sit on the couch and watch movies all day and eat junk food, but that's just not me. He stated that he was not at a stage where he would do anything to get back on the grid. He acknowledged that he might not have access to all opportunities under the sun, but he had a strong desire to win and return to a top team. The signs are pointing towards getting back on the grid, Riccardo said. I feel like that's where I'm tracking in my head, and a few of the habits that I'm having or doing is pointing towards that. Furthermore, he emphasized the importance of being in a team where he felt confident and had his mojo back. However, Riccardo says he's yet to enter serious talks about 2024 with any teams. I'm happy to roll with it probably until the summer or June, July, and then see where I'm at. Maybe sit down with my team and think, what are we going to need to do now to realistically try to put me back on the grid? It's not about me this year, the 33-year-old wrote on LinkedIn. It's about the wider team and trying to contribute and help them where I can. Riccardo admitted, however, that it's the first year in over a decade in which his goals are not 100% about racing and competing. I don't want the year to pass me by, because if I'm racing again next year, I wish I made the most of my free time whilst I had it, Riccardo added. It's that if that makes us wonder if indeed the passion and drive to survive, if you'll pardon the reference, is alive. There's a good chance, however, that Danny still has the passion, and therefore may humble himself and his salary in order to secure a spot with any team in 2024. If he doesn't find himself in his own car, however, we believe he'll pursue these other interests he's alluded to this season. Zach Brown maintains that he'll hopefully come back in 2024. What do you think? Will we see Riccardo back on the grid in 2024? Let us know in the comments.